The notification came in at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning, while I was still in my pajamas making coffee. Sweetheart, I think it's time we all got together. Just family. I miss you. Mom. I stared at the message for a long time. Long enough for my coffee to go cold. My mother and I weren't estranged, exactly. We still texted on birthdays. She sent me articles sometimes, recipes, horoscopes, things she thought I'd like. But we weren't close. Hadn't been since she left when I was 11, packed 2 suitcases while my dad was at work, and moved 40 minutes across town to be with the man she'd been seeing for almost a year. I found out from my aunt, not from her. My dad raised me after that. Just the 2 of us in our house in Columbus, Ohio, eating dinner at the same table every night, watching the same baseball team lose every October. He worked in civil engineering. He was quiet, steady, the kind of man who fixed things when they broke and didn't complain about it. He taught me how to balance a checkbook when I was 16, and how to read a lease agreement before I signed it. He said the world would try to confuse me with paperwork, and I should never let it. He died 8 months ago. A stroke. Sudden. In the middle of an ordinary Wednesday. I got the call from his neighbor. I was 31. I had no siblings. And just like that, I was the only one left. The estate took a few months to sort through. Dad had a will, of course he did, because he was the kind of man who prepared for things, and he left everything to me. The house in Columbus, a savings account, a life insurance policy, and a modest investment portfolio his financial advisor had been managing for years. Altogether, when everything settled, it came to just under $340,000. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't nothing either. My mother knew. I don't know exactly how. Maybe through my aunt, maybe through someone at the funeral who talked too much. But she knew. So when her message arrived that Tuesday morning, I felt something cold move through me. Not grief. Something more like recognition. Just family, she'd written. I almost didn't reply. But I did, because I was still, after everything, her daughter. I asked what she had in mind. She said she'd been thinking about renting a private room at a restaurant, somewhere nice. She wanted me to meet her husband. They'd been together 15 years, married for 9. But I'd only seen him twice, and her 2 stepchildren, who were in their mid-20s now. She said it would be good for all of us to connect. She said my dad would have wanted that. I remember reading that last line 3 times. My dad, who had sat alone at my high school graduation because my mother sent a card instead of showing up. My dad, who never once said a bad word about her to my face, even when I was angry enough to say plenty of bad words myself. My dad, who had spent 20 years building a life for the 2 of us after she walked out of it, he would have wanted that. I told her I'd think about it. I thought about it for a week. I called my best friend, who told me to trust my gut. I called my dad's sister, my Aunt Cecile, who paused for a long time before she said, "Just be careful, honey. Your mama didn't call for no reason." I almost canceled. I even typed out the message. But something stopped me. I think it was curiosity, more than anything. I wanted to know what she was actually going to say to my face. So I said yes. The restaurant was in the short north, one of those renovated spaces with exposed brick and Edison bulbs and a prix-fixe menu. My mother had reserved a private room in the back. She told me 6:30. I arrived at 6:25. The hostess led me down a hallway past the main dining room, and I could hear noise from behind a closed door before she even opened it. Voices. Multiple voices. She opened the door. I stopped. There was a long rectangular table set for 7. My mother sat at the far end, already holding a glass of wine. Her husband, I'll call him my stepfather, though that word has never sat right in my mouth, was beside her. Her 2 stepchildren, a man and a woman who looked to be around my age, sat across from each other in the middle. And at the near end, next to an empty seat that was clearly meant for me, sat a man in a charcoal suit with a leather portfolio open in front of him. A man I had never seen before in my life. I looked at my mother. She smiled and lifted her glass slightly, like she was toasting something. "You made it," she said. "Come sit down." I didn't move. "Who is that?" The man in the suit stood up and extended his hand. He introduced himself. "I won't use his name." He said he was an attorney. He said he was there to help facilitate a conversation about my father's estate. I looked at my mother again. Her smile didn't waver. I counted the people at the table. My mother, my stepfather, 2 stepchildren, 1 attorney. I did the math on how long it had taken to arrange all of this. The restaurant reservation, the private room, the lawyer with his leather portfolio. This was not a family dinner. This was a negotiation. And I was the only one who hadn't known it. I pulled out the empty chair and sat down. I set my purse on the table in front of me. I didn't say anything yet. The attorney sat back down and opened his portfolio. My mother began talking about how hard the last year had been, about how much she'd loved my father despite everything that had happened between them, about how she felt that his passing had left some things unresolved. She used that word a lot, unresolved. Her stepchildren nodded. My stepfather was quiet but watched me steadily like he was calculating something. Then the attorney started talking. He talked about the estate. He knew the numbers. Not exactly, but close enough that my skin prickled. He talked about equitable distribution and family welfare and the spirit of what your father would have intended. He slid a document across the table toward me. I looked at it without touching it. It was a voluntary redistribution agreement. My mother was asking me to sign over 40% of my father's estate. The split would be divided between her stepchildren's college loan debt, and a family fund for future expenses. There was a line for my signature at the bottom. I sat very still. "He was your father," my mother said. "But he was also someone who cared about family, about all of us being okay." "He divorced you," I said, "in 2003. That doesn't mean." "And you remarried in 2015. I looked at her husband. "Congratulations, by the way. I don't think I ever said that." My stepfather cleared his throat. "The point," the attorney said smoothly, "is that your mother has a moral claim." "A moral claim isn't a legal claim," I said. He smiled the kind of smile that people use when they think they're the smartest person in the room. "Of course not. But going through probate court can be a lengthy, expensive process for everyone involved." "If there were to be a challenge filed, on what grounds?" I asked. He paused. "My father had a valid will, properly witnessed and notarized, filed with the Franklin County Probate Court," I said. "He had no outstanding marital obligations to my mother. Those were settled in the 2003 divorce decree. He paid no alimony because she remarried, which terminated that obligation under Ohio law. He was my sole guardian and custodial parent from the time I was 11, which means there was no child support running in any direction. His estate passed to me as his sole beneficiary, cleanly, without dispute." I paused. "So, I'll ask again, on what grounds?" The attorney looked at my mother. Something passed between them. I had not pulled this information from thin air. After I'd said yes to the dinner, something had kept nagging at me. The careful wording of her texts, the restaurant choice, the just family framing that felt off. 3 days before this dinner, I had called a probate attorney named Catherine, someone my dad's financial advisor had recommended when the estate was being settled. I told her what I suspected might be coming. She told me exactly what I needed to know, and then she offered to come with me. I had told her I'd like that. I turned to the door behind me and opened it. Catherine walked in. She set her own bag on the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down beside me. She was 62, small, with silver hair and reading glasses she wore on a chain around her neck. "Good evening," she said pleasantly, to no one in particular. Then she looked at the other attorney's portfolio and said, "I'd love to see whatever you've prepared, if you don't mind." The room was extremely quiet. My mother set down her wine glass. "You brought a lawyer," she said. Her voice had gone flat. "You brought a lawyer," I said. "I brought mine." What followed wasn't a scene exactly. There was no shouting. There was a very tense 40 minutes in which Catherine reviewed the document the other attorney had drafted, asked him several pointed questions that he answered poorly, and ultimately confirmed what I already knew. The agreement was entirely voluntary and had no legal force behind it. There was no viable basis to contest the will. Any challenge filed in probate court would almost certainly be dismissed. My stepfather's children were quiet through most of it. The younger one, the woman, looked genuinely uncomfortable. At one point she whispered something to her brother and he shook his head. My mother tried twice more. Once she talked about the years she'd been there for me when I was young. Before she left, she meant, though she didn't say that. Once she said that my dad had always wanted me to be generous. He also wanted me to read everything before I signed it, I said. He taught me that himself. When Catherine finished her review, she slid the document back across the table unsigned. I stood up and put on my coat. My mother looked older than I remembered. Some of the composure she'd walked in with had worn away, and underneath it she looked tired and something else, maybe embarrassed, maybe just caught. I would have given you something, I said. If you had just called me. If you had just asked. I meant it. I had thought about it actually, in those weeks after the estate settled, whether to reach out to her, whether to offer something, not because she deserved it, but because I had enough. And I didn't want to carry bitterness for the rest of my life. But not like this. Never like this. She didn't answer. I thanked the hostess on my way out. The night air outside was cold and clean, and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment with Catherine before she headed to her car. You did well in there, she said. I was terrified, I told her. I know, she said. You didn't show it. It's been 4 months since that dinner. My mother has not contacted me since, which I think is her version of being ashamed, though I can't be certain. My stepfather's daughter sent me a message about 2 weeks later. She said she was sorry for how it had gone. She said she hadn't fully understood what the meeting was for until she was already there. I believed her. I wrote back. We've exchanged a few messages since. I kept the estate intact for several months, just to make sure there were no surprises. Then I did 3 things. I paid off the remainder of my own student loans, $4,200, a number I had stared at for years, and felt something loosen in my chest when the balance hit 0. I hired a contractor to repair the foundation issue in my dad's house, the one he'd been meaning to fix for 2 years. I'm renting the house now to a young couple who moved here from Michigan. They're good tenants. They sent me a photo of their dog sitting in the backyard, squinting into the sun. And I made a donation to a legal aid organization in Columbus that helps people navigate probate and estate disputes when they can't afford representation. I did it in my dad's name. He would have liked that, not because he was sentimental, but because he believed people deserved to understand the paperwork. He believed that very deeply. I'm not angry. I've thought about this a lot, and I think the truest thing I can say is that I'm not angry. I'm sad, sometimes, about the version of a mother I never really got to have. I'm sad that when she finally reached out, it was for this. But I also know something now that I didn't know before that dinner. I know I'm capable of sitting in a room full of people who want something from me and not giving it to them. I know I can be scared and still be steady. My dad knew that about me before I did. I think that's why he left me everything without a second thought. He knew I'd figure out what to do with it. When someone tells you a family meeting is just about reconnecting, pay attention to the details they don't mention. The private room, the careful timing, the things left out of the invitation. My dad used to say that the most important information is usually what people choose not to tell you. He was right about that. He was right about most things. I still have his coffee mug on my desk. It's chipped at the handle, and the logo is almost completely faded, and I've never once thought about replacing it. Some things you just keep. I've thought a lot about what my mother expected to happen that night. I think she expected me to freeze, to sit at that table surrounded by people who had prepared for months while I had prepared for nothing, and to feel so outnumbered, so caught off guard, that signing would feel like the only way out of the room. She wasn't entirely wrong about how it would have gone. If I hadn't listened to that small, persistent voice that told me something was off. That voice was my father's in a way. Not literally. But he spent 20 years teaching me to pay attention to the details people leave out. He used to say that a contract is only as honest as the person offering it and that you should never let the discomfort of a moment pressure you into a decision that outlasts it. I didn't always understand what he meant when I was younger. I understand it completely now. What happened in that restaurant was a consequence of choices, not mine, but my mother's. She chose to leave when I was 11. She chose to build a different life, a different family, and to stay mostly at the edges of mine for 20 years. Those were her decisions to make, and I stopped being angry about them a long time ago. But choices have weight. They accumulate. And when my father died and left everything to the daughter who had actually been there, who had sat with him through quiet evenings and driven him to appointments and listened to his stories about projects he'd worked on 30 years ago, that wasn't an accident. It was the shape of a life, made visible. My mother looked at that shape and saw an injustice. I think she genuinely believed she deserved something. And maybe that's the saddest part of all of this. Not the ambush, not the lawyer, not the document with a signature line at the bottom. The saddest part is that she had convinced herself the story was unfair to her. But here's what I know about integrity. It doesn't announce itself. It's just what's left when you strip away the performance. Catherine didn't walk into that room and make speeches. She sat down, put on her reading glasses, and asked the other attorney 3 questions he couldn't answer cleanly. That was enough. Preparation is its own kind of courage. Quiet, unsexy, and completely unmovable. I think about the version of myself who almost didn't go that night, who typed out the cancellation and then deleted it, who almost let curiosity lose to self-protection. I'm glad she didn't win, because walking into that room, scared as I was, and staying steady, that taught me something about myself I needed to know. You don't find out what you're made of in the easy moments. You find out when someone slides a document across a table and the room goes quiet and everyone is watching to see what you'll do. I pushed it back, not out of cruelty, not to punish anyone, but because my father taught me that the paperwork matters, that the words have to mean what they say, and that you should never sign something just because the silence in a room becomes uncomfortable. He was right. He was almost always right. I still have his coffee mug. I'm not replacing it,